Yeah, just tell us who you are, Roly, and where we are.
Right, okay. My name is Roland Clarke. I'm known to the majority of people as Roly. In fact, if I get a letter addressed to Roland, I know it's going to cost me money. You're in the garden of our cottage in Fownhope, Lupins, where we've lived for 42 years, and which prior to that used to belong to my grandfather.
Roly, can you tell me about your hat?
The hat I've had for a number of years. It's a hat which I always wear on club day now. Put the badges on the one side as when they're issued. On this side I usually find some oak apples and some oak leaves, which those are the ones from last club walk. A bit withered up now, but I'll leave them in there until next year, just to remind me of the previous club walk really. But yeah, this is a hat I always wear on club day, so it's part of me on that day. Yeah.
Can you tell me the story? You were just telling me now over there about your grandfather, and if you could just tell me what you were telling me just now about him and the death of his son in the war, and how the club walk gave him a sense of purpose again after his
Yeah,
Could you start off by saying my grandfather and his name, and if you could put it all into context, so as if you're telling me like you've never told me the story before.
yeah,
Is
okay.
that okay, Roly? Thank
Yep.
you.
Okay. My grandfather was Albert George Godsall. Before he moved here, he had a small holding in the village, small farm, about half a mile up the road. And his father, who would have been my great-grandfather, Charles Godsall, was a founder member of the walk in 1876. So consequently, to that side of the family, the club walk has always been very, very important. Grandfather had one son, Cuthbert Godsall, who, like his father and his grandfather, joined up as a young man, joined the club parade as a young man, and took part in the processions. He got called up in service in the Second World War, and in June 1940 I think it was. He got called up and unfortunately got killed in 1942. Being a very close-knit family, it hit grandfather really hard, and all the time they didn't have a procession during the war, but they kept the actual monetary aspect of the club still going, and grandfather was a trustee, and he, I'm sure, found solace really in the club, because to keep it going, it was, I think, his connection with the son that he'd lost, because the day formed so much, it was so important to the family. And I really did think that he thought that by keeping the club going and keeping that connection going, he was in effect keeping Cuthbert alive. So yeah, he and as you said, when I come along, I think he took a great deal of time with me, because again I was feeling I was sort of supplying a bit of a void in his life, maybe. Yeah.
How important was it to you, that connection between you and your grandfather and the club walk? Can you describe a bit of that? And you were telling me before the preparation used to start on a Thursday night. Can you just tell us that story?
Yeah, it was just something I was brought up with, how important it was, because you've got to remember that grandfather would start planning for the next club walk on the Sunday after the Saturday when it was held. On the Sunday he'd be thinking about next year. So consequently, it was always a topic of conversation. There would be other events through the year maybe, but not possibly as many as there is now. There was not so much sort of entertainment generally, and the club walk was of such great importance within the village that it was quite a topic of conversation anyway. So it was something I was brought up with, yeah. It was just an important day, as it is now, to me and to a lot of other people.
So describe the preparation in the garden then. You're in this garden. So what would happen? How would you prepare for the day?
Well, I have prepared by really growing stuff to coincide with the day. We're looking at a late May, preferably early June, club day, because it's held on the nearest Saturday to O'Copple Day, which is May the 29th. So I tend to try and grow stuff to coincide that's going to flower, because it's just so important, yeah, to have it looking right.
Why is it so important?
Because it's an old-fashioned English tradition. It's years ago, many villages would have had a club, Heart of Oak, not a Heart of Oak, but a friendly society rather. And there's very, very few, if not none, left in our form. So, yeah, it's vital to keep it going.
Can you just describe the sticks you got there? So if you can just pick the stick up.
This is the stick that I carry. Was carried by my grandfather on the occasions when he wasn't carrying a banner, but most of the time he was carrying a banner. So this would have been the one that my father would have had. Until in later years he took over carrying a banner from my grandfather. In the end, there's a hole where at one time there would be a carved acorn on a peg pushed into there, but over the years it's disappeared, and like we're talking prior super glue sort of days here, and it's just got lost. But I would ideally like to get one carved. The other stick that we've got here is the juvenile stick that the youngsters compete for. This one and the actual senior stick were both carved by one of our members, Mr. Williams, who lives at Manor Farm. He kindly carved these beautiful sticks. And this year, my grandson won it, who's 5, and I had the very proud experience of seeing it handed over by my granddaughter, who'd won it the previous year, who's age 9, and she's won it twice in those 9 years, so I'm really pleased about that. The senior stick evaded my capture this year. I have won it several times in the past, and in fact, in 19, I won it in 97, 98, and then I missed 99 because I didn't take part in the walk on 99, and I came back and won it in 2000, which to me I was really pleased about, because 2000 was like a milestone. But the committee then came up with a devious scheme to sort of thwart this, and decided that they would, whoever won it the previous year would judge it the next year. So consequently, that was altered then.
Tell me about, do you remember your very first walk?
Yeah, I don't remember it. I've got pictures of me on it.
Can you just say, I've got pictures of my very first walk? So whoever's watching this, Roly, will know we're talking about your very first walk.
I've got pictures of my first club walk, yeah. When I was 4. 2 two or three nice pictures, because when you're the youngest person in it, then you're a bit of a focus of attention. Like the most old member of the society normally is the younger ones as well. Always, you know, they were always picked up, particularly by, in those days, the Hereford Times. So I can't honestly remember the first walk, no.
But other walks when you were a young lad, I mean, I wonder if you could describe the makeup of the parade, because girls weren't allowed in it, were they? So if you could just describe, as a lad, if you could say when I was a boy.
Yeah, when I was a boy, the parade was just made up of male members.
Sorry, can we do that a little bit again? I just knocked the camera at the wrong moment. Sorry, Roly.
Okay.
My apologies.
When I was a young man, the parade was just made up of male members. Women folk weren't allowed in the parade, and it was a very sort of essentially male sort of world, really. Although saying that, I still feel and I still know that the women folk did form an essential part, really, with maybe the dress and the stick or behind the scenes. It was a very formal parade, in that we marched in pairs with the sticks carried on our outward shoulder, whichever side we were on. And if you were a child, the older members were at the front, and if you were a child, you marched at the tail end and were kept in order by an elderly club member who was quite stern, and he, you know, commanded a lot of respect. So he kept the children in order. But going back to the women folk certainly weren't involved in the parade like they are now, since the club has been reformed. They now take part in the parade and are actively encouraged to. But as I said before, the women folk did take a part in it, because, as my grandfather always used to say, that they must have took part in the sort of enjoyment of the day, because grandfather used to say that when he was a young man, that after a late May or early June club day, that in the early part of the next year, the vicar would always be busy doing christenings. So I guess they must have either enjoyed the afternoon or definitely the evening.
Sorry, yeah. Sorry, Mark.
Can you describe to us about decorating the stick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The stick decoration really is very dependent on what flowers you've got at your to hand, really. The best sort of flowers to have are rhododendrons, azaleas, peonies, old roses, stuff with hard stems. Stuff with soft stems, no good at all. And the correct old-fashioned way of decorating a stick really is to work each individual bloom in as you go along, rather than just lumping them all on the end. It takes a lot of skill, and I have to thank my wife for that, and she learned her trade from my mother, so again the family connection goes on. But it's really about growing the right sort of stuff and knowing what you're doing. Yeah. So
Has we were joking before about people going around others' gardens at night time and seeing what's growing.
Oh, yeah.
Can we just talk? I mean, it's quite funny, but can we just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there's always been an element of I bet you didn't have that growing in your garden sort of caper, and always been a bit of competition and banter. But yeah, I would say that if I've seen something that needs pruning off a footpath in the past, I've probably done my duty and sort of given it a bit of a trim up, like, you know, on the night before or on early in the morning. But on one year, this had could have had serious repercussions, because I'd been in the churchyard on the Friday evening tending the family grave, and I happened to notice some lilac which was dangling over into the churchyard from the neighbour's garden. So early the next morning, got the secateurs in my back pocket, off up the churchyard. Anyway, snipped this lilac off, way to go, and of course I was rushing, and the flagstones were mossy and wet with dew, and I went a complete flyer, and trying to protect the lilac blooms, fell on the upturned cutting edge of the secateurs, which I managed to stick into my nostrils. So I arrived back down here, and blood, white shirt all covered in blood pouring out my nose, and Pam looked horrified, and, you know, what the hell's happened? And I tried to explain, but she'd already got this mental picture of me being apprehended by the vicar who dispensed his own form of justice, see. Now, anyway, yeah, I didn't get no sympathy, because she just kept muttering about divine retribution for me being in the churchyard. And anyhow, we went to eventually stop bleeding, but I spent the rest of the day walking around with a nose like Coco. And the bottom line was that the lilac that we carefully put into the stick, that I carefully saved when I fell over, all disintegrated. So maybe there was a judgment from above about that.
Tell us then about any romance on the day?
Oh, there was.
There was.
Definitely, but I from personal experience, no. I think it potentially had, it depended on how much ale you drunk. Because after you'd had a fair proportion of ale, possibly the opposite partner might get a lot better looking, you know. But
Sorry. Yes. Do you remember?
But I remember once, like the men always. You were ready to go?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's all right. No, don't apologise. Go on.
The men definitely did used to look forward to club day as a day when they could really let their hair down. I remember as a child, as I said, we used to come here on club day and the Friday before, because Friday night was an integral part of Club Walk weekend. The fair would be operational. There would be skittles across the top of the New Inn car park, and if it was a Friday night in the summer, they would probably be playing quoits in the New Inn. And they would have a clay pigeon shoot very often on a Friday night. So it really kicked off on the Friday, and the old boys used to get in the swing of things then, yeah. But I remember, particularly after a day of having the occasional drink, shall we say, I remember one evening, or one night rather, we were here, and I was only a small child, and we heard this commotion outside, and woke the old house up, and we came down. I remember coming down with Mother, and Father was on the lawn just down by the cottage, and there was a big bramley tree there then, and he was on all fours underneath this bramley tree with his hands tightly gripping the grass and hollering at the top of his voice. Anyway, it turned out the next day, when he explained, by that time he was capable of explaining what was going on, and he said that he felt like he was on a roundabout and he was about to be thrown off. Now, what the hell he'd been drinking that day, I don't know. But there was a funny sequel to this actually, was that the Blenheim tree, when we moved here, the Blenheim tree was still here. So he decided that the Blenheim tree wasn't safe, and it was quite close to the back of the cottage, so he decided he was going to fall this Blenheim tree. So came down armed with an axe and a chainsaw, and we were a bit perturbed about him falling onto the cottage. And he assured us, no problem with that, it's not going to fall on the cottage. And he was absolutely dead right. He pushed an hole in the roof of the coal shed instead. But it didn't fall on the cottage. But yeah, they really did enter into the swing of things, because I say it was their, very often it was their one day of the year to really let their hair down.
Do you remember when women first started walking?
Yeah, I think women became involved in the procession when it was reformed as probably a less sort of formal society in 1989, because in up to 1988 it was classified as a friendly society, whereby you paid in a subscription, and then if you fell sick you could draw money out. Then it became evident there might be tax implications, so they decided to dissolve the old society and reform it. And when they reformed it, I think they were just it was just to keep the tradition alive. But I always remember that in 1987 it was, just before it finished, I fell ill with hepatitis. And I was quite ill, and Father said, oh, you paid into the club all these years, why don't you claim on the club? Because I could still claim then. So I said, yeah, okay, yeah. So I had to go to the doctors to get a certificate, and the certificate cost me £1, and I then found out that the club were paying out £1 a week. So the first week I broke even on the deals, which didn't sound too great a deal to me really. But it hadn't kept pace with modern day really, because I've got a copy of the accounts from 1927 and 1929, and in those days they were getting paid out 10 shilling a week. So it was worth having. Yeah.
And that's the point about it, isn't it? It's to support people who fall on hard times. Or
That's what it was. It was prior Social Security sort of days, and you've got to remember that most of these guys were in, they were in hard and sort of low-paid employment, like agricultural labourers, builders' labourers, estate workers, council roadmen. So yeah, it was a big deal, and that's what it was formed for. Yeah.
So have your children, or you've got a son?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when your son came along, can you talk about how important the walk has been for you as a dad and your son? Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, my son, now I'm very proud that he carries the banner, as his great grandfather and his grandfather did for a while, and his two children, Emily and Tom, both take part in the parade, and it's all just part of keeping that family tradition alive and going, and that connection. But I would like to say to people that you don't have to have a family connection going back years and years and years to take part. Just a passion to keep English tradition going.
The role of a tradition, because it is a unique event, isn't it, this? The role that plays in the wider community.
It plays quite an important part in the wider community, because being a charitable organisation, since it ceased to be the members enjoy the benefit, we now try to ensure that the local community benefits from any money that we raise. So we have raised quite a bit of money for different projects, or made donations to different projects within the village and, I must say, surrounding villages as well. So yeah, we're still trying to keep that sort of connection going with the community as a charitable organisation.
So do you think it changed when women were allowed to start walking?
Do you think it's changed?
Do you think it changed when women were allowed to?
No, I don't think so. Not to any great degree, because the actual whole concept of it really has changed. It's a completely different ball game now to what it used to be. Completely different. The fair, when the fair ceased, that took a big element of the day away. The fair certainly was a real big draw, because you've got to remember that in those days that the pubs had to get out here. There was 3 pubs, and they had to get a special license because they were open all day. Because open all day then was quite a novelty. So consequently, you got loads of people coming out from Hereford to sort of take advantage of the open all day hours. It has changed dramatically. The fair, I just can't over sort of say how much important it was. They must have made, the guy who used to run the fair was an old boy named Billy Watkins, and several of the older people within the village community can remember when he used to take a wheelbarrow full of silver in a wheelbarrow, which he used to take to the local post office, the old post office, for the postmistress to count and bank. They would have taken a considerable amount of money.
When is this? When are we talking? When did the fair stop?
I would say about 80s, I would say. Because after that they did have a small children's fair, which used to be in the New Inn. There used to be an orchard by the New Inn, and they used to have like a small sort of children's fair in there. Because I can remember my son actually attending that the one year, and they had some swinging boats there, and he, like a lot of the children, had been eating and drinking all day, and probably blagging a few drinks when he shouldn't have been drinking here and there. You know, when an adult's back was turned, he was probably having a bit of a gulp of whatever, like cider, and he must have been about 10, and he was on the swinging boat with his mate, and of course he started to feel unwell. Whenever he got to the top of the arc, he started to feel unwell, and the lad in the bottom, his mate in the bottom of the boat, kept getting the benefit of this. He kept getting the benefit of the eruption in the bottom, and the swinging boat kept going, and the poor kid in the bottom, whenever John reached the top, the kid in the bottom started to scream because he knew what was going to happen. Anyway, they eventually stopped and they got him off, and he was absolutely drenched, and he had to get took home and changed. But I thought it was hilarious.
How awful! You're my son's friend. Oh my God, how awful!
There's about the sticks. There was something I should have said about the sticks, actually, about dressing the sticks. But
I wonder even just about the sticks. When you all gather in the car park, the New Inn, are you looking at other people's sticks thinking, oh, that's pretty good?
oh, definitely, there's a lot of that goes on.
Can you just talk about that? So can you just start off by saying, we all gather in the New Inn, and you're looking at just frame the question in your answer, Roly.
Yeah, whenever we gather, well, on the morning when we gather in the new inn, I usually disappear and have a drink. It's always traditional that I have a drink before the parade. So I usually take my stick inside, and but saying that, I'm always looking around to see what other people have got and wondering where the flowers have appeared from, and making sure there's none appeared from my garden. But the one year, a guy turned up there with the stick, with a bunch of flowers plonked on the end of a broomstick, and the broom head was still attached to the stick, and he just pushed these flowers on the end, and I thought that was great. It was all about the taking part. But there is a lot. There still is a lot of competition and envy amongst people, because they're just weighing it up and seeing what people have got, because there is a lot of pride in it. Yeah.
Do people ever go into other people's gardens? And
I wouldn't go on other people's property. No. No. Just if something was looking a bit scruffy and hanging over the footpath.
Do you want that?
No, I've got it. Yeah.
I think that's quite funny.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question.
I can't say, although I've been a member for about over 55 years, I can't say that I've always been a continuous member. There was a period, mid-60s, when I started work at Prales in Hereford, and I had a motorbike, and it didn't seem really the cool thing to do, to walk around with a bunch of flowers on your back. So it wasn't of great inconvenience when I found out that I had to work Saturday mornings. One Saturday morning, I'd gone to work, I was coming back into the village, and the parade then used to go every year out to a place called Morney Cross, which is just outside the village on the Hereford side. And they used to go to either the one house the one side the one year, and the opposite the next. And I was quite happily coming back from work. It was a lovely day. I'd the previous week taken the baffles out the exhaust of the bike to make it sound even louder. The band and the procession had made their way to Mr. Barclay's house, and had just struck up a tune to let Mr. Barclay know that they'd arrived, and so we were both completely blissfully unaware of the other approach of the other side, and I sailed over the top of the hill on the bike to be confronted with this mass of people and flowers and instruments and whatever. And anyway, fortunately the braking on the bike was good, because it was a Japanese bike, because if it had been a British bike of the day, I would have probably been facing a charge of manslaughter. But anyway, pulled the bike up, stopped okay. Father, fortunately that year, was carrying a banner, which kind of restricted his movements, because he couldn't do anything because he was holding a banner. But I could see him sort of saying something, and it wasn't "Hello son, how are you?" like. So anyway, I crept off home, came down in the afternoon to the sports and the fair in the evening, and kept out of his way. By the time I got home, I'd got long gone to bed before he arrived home, and that was when we were living up at Outcaple, and I'd long gone to bed. So next morning I was a bit perturbed about coming down to breakfast, but he was pretty quiet actually, because Mother had given him her normal dressing down, the post sort of club walk dressing down for him arriving home at some unearthly hour, as opposed to me. So I never heard any more about it. So yeah, it was quite funny at the time.
Did you want to speak about the activities then, Roly, and the sports?
Yep. Okay.
Yep, good.
We've always had sports on the day, which the children take part in, and a couple maybe of adult sort of races. I've mentioned the fair, I've mentioned clay pigeon shooting. We used to have a pole and pillow fight, which was very, very popular, particularly amongst the members of the farming community, who always seemed to be the strongest and able to stop on there the longest. And skittles across the top of the Newing car park, and skittles were always very, very popular, outdoor skittles. The actual alley was laid out across the top end of the New Inn, with the skittles, what you were bowling at, actually on the Green Man hedge side. So occasionally you would get somebody coming out from the New Inn with probably too much ale on board. They would end up bowling a wide, and the ball would manage to evade the scroll bales at the end, and disappear through the edge into the Green Man car park. And in all probability clatter somebody's pride and joy that they parked in there, which happened on a few occasions, which I don't think we get away with now. But it did mean did put an all new perspective on, can we all have our ball back, please? I remember once with the skittles, actually, I'd just come out of the bar of the New Inn, and they used to have a prize for the ladies and a prize for the men. And a woman had just recorded the highest score for the ladies. So she turned around to me, she was a visitor from Hereford, somebody I didn't know. She turned around to me and she said, I've just got the highest score, what do I win, what do I win? And I said, well, normal country prize. She said, what's that? I said, pig. So she looked at me and she said, pig? I said, yeah. She said, a real pig? And I said, yeah, well, yeah, he's real all right, like. And you could see her brain then thinking, well, how am I going to get this pig home, like? And I said, well, it's okay. I said, we'll give you a bit of string, like. And the poor woman went back outside, and she was almost willing every other participant on the ladies to get a score that was better than hers. And eventually I felt that sorry for her. I had to go and tell her the truth. But it's quite a good joke while it lasted, yeah. As a child, I had an inspiring sort of character who was a friend of my grandfather's, who took part in the walk. And this guy's name was Henry, and we all knew him as Harry Jauncey. And he lived in a neighbouring small farm to where grandfather lived, and was very good friends. This old boy always used to have an immaculate stick, which was comprised of lilac and old roses, peonies, and he was my inspiration, this guy, because as a small child I can always remember looking in awe at this creation he carried, and ever since I've always tried to grow stuff to almost compete with that vision that I've always held about this old boy stick. Yeah. I would like to say that the Heart of Oak Society is open to anyone to join and take part in, not necessarily to have family connection within the village, just a passion to keep alive an old tradition. So you don't have to live in the village. You could live in another part of the country and just come and share in the experience of taking part, and the joy of seeing other people enjoying themselves, and the colour, and I just like to get across to people that it is totally open. There is no restriction, whether you're male, female, whatever. Just come along and enjoy a nice day out in the countryside.
Can I ask you just one final question? What do you say to your grandchildren, or what do you say to your grandchildren? How do you convey this passion you have, this event? The
grandchildren, we try to involve as much as we can with it. They are fortunate really in a way that they can come out here the previous week and say to Pam, Nanny, can I have that in my club stick? Can you put that in it? So they essentially we try and get them to come out and choose what they would like in the stick to involve them in it. It normally works all right. We don't have them here on the Saturday morning when we're dressing the stick, probably in case they pick up any words that they wouldn't be taught in school, because occasionally there's a bit of friction, and occasionally there's some flowers goes up in the air, but they always tend to land in the right place magically. So the end result is normally good, but they're normally about your in a couple of days beforehand selecting what they would like in their stick. So it's important, I think, in that aspect to get them involved in the day. Yeah.
Just one more thing. Sorry, about dressing the stick. Is it fraught?
Is it what? Sorry.
Fraught, stressful morning dressing the stick. Are you getting?
Very stressful. This morning, the morning of the walk, yeah, is very stressful.
Sorry, can
but
we have that the morning of the walk again? Because we had a motorbike just
all right.
up. Sorry, Roly.
Yeah.
The morning of the walk is quite stressful because we have got to find flowers for 3 sticks, 2 juvenile, 1 adult, and the 1 adult really is probably more of a big kid than the other 2 when it comes to this, because he wants to be the number 1 with it. So yeah, it's got to be right, but it's quite stressful, but it all comes right in the end.
That's a lovely way to end it.